everybody, I'm Jeff Wall, and today we are counting down the top 5 action fighters in MMA history. Now, I bet some of you are already wondering, Jeff, what is an action fighter? Well, an action fighter is basically a mixed martial artist that a promoter can put on just about any card, and they're a pretty good bet to be the fight of the night. Their styles almost never generate a dud. These are the mixed martial artists that make you want to tune in to every single card that they're on.
As for the criteria, we are only including athletes that have done this at the top level. So that's Pride, the UFC, WEC, Strikeforce, Dream, and Bellator. And none of them can have a championship belt of any kind in any of these promotions because, generally speaking, most of these action fighters never really reach the championship level. We scored this one out of 5 categories. Great fights, 3 points, reckless style, 3 points, longevity, 3 points, finishing ability, 3 points, and heart, 3 points. Obviously, everybody has heart, but this is more about can they fight through adversity and maybe can they have a few comeback moments.
Our first action fighter on the countdown is a favorite of yours truly, Cub Swanson.
Cub Swanson is beloved by just about every hardcore fan. Swanson throws heat all fight long. He matches his aggressiveness and somewhat unorthodox nature with his well-developed boxing and jiu-jitsu game. Slick head movement followed up by fast counterpunching will leave you filling the air with the sounds of Joe Rogan. And who doesn't love some hip tosses? Although Swanson possesses a ton of high-level skill that has had him on the doors of a title shot, he can definitely get wild, and there's no doubt he loves a scrap. He's traded shots with Jeremy Stephens, Kron Gracie, Dennis Seaver, Ross Pearson, Dustin Poirier, and an infamous battle in Toronto with the Korean Superboy, Doo Ho Choi. A fight many consider to be the best fight in the history of the sport. And let me tell you, it definitely gets my vote. Swanson gets 3 points for great fights, 1.5 for reckless style, which has gone on and off throughout his career. Longevity is 3 because he's been doing this for a very long time at a very high level. Finishing is a 1 because he hasn't finished anybody in quite some time. And his heart, we're going to give him a 2.5. because he can push through just about anything. All that for a score of 11.
Now for number 4, we're going to stay right here in the Great White North. For London, Ontario's own, Sam Stout.
When the UFC brought back the lightweight division in 2006, Sam Stout was matched up with Spencer Fisher at UFC 58 USA vs. Canada. In a barn burner that would set the stage for the rest of his career, Stout came out on top in an absolute classic. Whenever you saw his name on the card, you knew you were going to get a fighter that could throw caution to the wind, the kind of guy that could fight at a high pace and eat 10 punches just to land 1. That's the kind of guy Sam Stout is. Stout probably had one of the sport's best chins to go along with his incredible heart. During a 9-year UFC run, Stout provided MMA fans with classics they'll never forget, including 2 more classics with Fisher, a win over Joe Lozon, and another great fight with a hard-hitting Jeremy Stephens. The Team Tompkins product gets a 2 for the amount of classic fights he's been in, 3 for his incredibly reckless style, 3 for longevity, 3 for heart, and only half a point with a KO over Yves Edwards being his lone finish at the top level for a score of 11.5.
Learned a little bit more about the toughness and the heart of Sam Stout tonight, didn't we?
Well, I don't think that's ever been in question. He's a tough guy. You don't get to be a world championship kickboxer by being a pussy.
No true heavyweight made the top 5 of this countdown, but Mark Hunt has had some amazing signature moments and too many action fighter traits to not give him his due on this countdown.
The Super Samoan was a kickboxer before committing to MMA full-time. Those skills translated greatly, though, to MMA, as the KFC King himself produced many memorable moments.
No, I just eat a lot. Eat too much. UFC? KFC.
Hunt was a true knockout artist. He definitely packs a punch, but unlike most heavyweights, his KOs were often the result of some beautiful setups. which led him to many walk-off KOs as a signature part of Hunt's career. Mark Hunt had to deal with some hiccups early on in his MMA career as he first struggled to adapt to the grappling in MMA. Eventually, though, with his surprising speed, strength, and footwork, he managed to keep most of his fights on the feet while keeping fans on their feet. His memorable moments with Junior Dos Santos, Bigfoot Silva, and Stefan Struve show the heart and will few human beings possess.
Up next at number 3 is Jim Miller, a man who only knows how to move forward.
One thing to know about Jim Miller is he is one tough son of a bitch. He can take punishment just about as well as he can dish it out. And versatility has never been an issue for the New Jersey submission artist. And that's one thing that not all action fighters have, is versatility. Jim Miller can get after his opponents with slashing elbows, non-stop ground and pound, and a full repertoire of submissions. Even though Lyme's disease halted his career for a time, even the debilitating disease could not stop the man. Over his UFC career that seems like it's never going to end, Miller has earned a total of 7 Fight of the Night bonuses. Miller has absolutely tangled with the best the UFC has to offer. Donald Cerrone, Michael Chiesa, Joe Lozon, Pat Healy, Thiago Alves, Dan Hooker, Anthony Pettis, Dustin Poirier, Benson Henderson, Charles Oliveira, Gleison Tibau, Mac Danzig, Gray Mader, Matt Wyman, Benil Dariush, Danny Castillo, Francisco Trinaldo, Clay Guida, Melvin Gillard, Takanori Gomi, Diego Sanchez, and Nate Diaz. Yeah, that's a lot of fucking names. And at lightweight, he is the current leader with the most total fights in the shark-infested waters, diving in with 33 total scraps. He also holds the most submission wins in the division with 9 and the most wins at 19. It's safe to say Jim Miller is a man who likes to live dangerously. Jim Miller gets 2.5 for the amount of great fights he's been in, 2.5 for the very reckless style that he has, and a 2.5 for longevity with a bit of an asterisk, and that's mostly just because of the Lyme disease that sort of halted his career for a little bit there. He gets a 3 for finishing and a 3 for heart for a total score of 13.
Our last honorable mention is someone who is probably just about as mentally tough as anybody. Kat Zingano is our last honorable mention.
Kat Zingano just missed the cut on the countdown, primarily due to inactivity, which is certainly no fault of her own. She has been through a ton and come back from it all. And that may be the best way to describe her fights. Zingano is a glacially slow starter. It could be argued that she's the slowest starter ever in the history of the sport, especially considering how high level she is. Zingano will be out of a fight from the opening bell to the moment she goes all out and takes the soul of her opponents. She could be getting worked for 2.5 rounds by Miesha Tate before storming back with a Street Fighter-esque finishing combo. Or on the wrong end of a beatdown from the GOAT, Amanda Nunes, only to rise from the ashes to finish Nunes. Zingano has the finishing ability few of her peers have, an aggressive style that any fan could watch, and the heart to match any champion.
So some of you watching this may not recognize the name of our number 2 fighter. This one is truly one for the hardcores. And it's Melvin Manhoff, who is an absolute wild man. When it comes to this guy's fights, you can guarantee one thing: a highlight reel knockout.
For those who have never seen a Melvin Manhoff fight, I regret to inform you, you have been missing out. Manhoff brought his kickboxing game into MMA, as well as the ferocity and reckless abandon that will put an early career Vanderlei Silva to shame. Manhoff throws everything into every single strike, and on the feet was by no means one-dimensional. His leg kicks, able to wreck the leg of Robbie Lawler, his punches that KO'd the iron-chinned Mark Hunt. Now, I bet you're all wondering, didn't Robbie Lawler only fight as high as middleweight and Mark Hunt is a career heavyweight? Well, you would be right. Melvin Manhoff is actually a middleweight, but has taken on all comers from middleweight to the heavyweight limits. Size has never been a concern in the mind of Manhoff. A lot of fighters say they're willing to die in the ring or the cage. Well, Melvin Manhoff brings new meaning to that. As I mentioned, you can almost always expect a highlight reel KO when he fights. A lot of the time, it's his opponents who end up staring up at the lights. But a lot of the time, it can be Melvin Manhoff himself. And that's why he is, and always will be, must watch. The Dutchman gets a score of 3 for the amount of great fights he's been in, with pretty much all of them at least being a great fight at the minimum. 3 for the reckless style that he possesses, 2 for longevity, 3 for finishing, 3 for heart, for a total score of 14. Now you know, the next man on the list has to be insane to top that one.
At the top of our countdown sits a fan favorite of just about every MMA fan, with a very familiar name to even less than casual fans. It's J-Lo. No, not that J-Lo, Joe Lauzon.
You've probably been wondering when Joe Lauzon would show up on this one, since we already mentioned his name a few times on this countdown. The man, sometimes known as J-Lo, is about as unassuming as the nickname would have you think. Joe Lauzon burst onto the scene when he took on Jens Pulver in his return to the cage back in 2007. Lauzon shocked everybody by KOing Jens Pulver inside of a minute, and few would underestimate him again. There may not be a more aggressive fighter in the sport's history. A man that is as good a bet as anybody to empty his tank in the first 5 minutes of every fight he is in. Lauzon hunts for the finish from the first second of the fight to the last, and loves himself a quick submission. Although recently he's been fine filling a guy in with strikes on the feet. Miller and him have a lot in common aside from sharing the cage twice. They've never been afraid to fight anyone, and the record speaks for itself. Aside from Miller, Pulver, and Stout, as mentioned previously, he's gone to war with Anthony Pettis, Michael Chiesa, Diego Sanchez, Clay Guida, Ali Quinta, Evan Dunham, Kenny Florian, Jeremy Stevens, George Soteropoulos, Melvin Gillard, Jamie Varner, Michael Johnson, Mac Danzig, Marcin Held, and former Pride champ Takanori Gomi. Even before the UFC, he fought Mike Brown, former WEC champ, Rafael Assunção, Ivan Menjivar, and Street Jesus himself, Jorge Masvidal. Dana White might want to consider naming some post-fight bonuses after Lauzon. During his time with the promotion, he's earned 1 knockout of the night bonus, 6 submission of the night bonuses, the most in UFC history, 1 performance of the night bonus, and 7 fight of the night bonuses. Add to that 2 fight of the year battles with Varner and Miller. It's tough to think of a more prototypical action fighter than this man. Lauzon gets a perfect score of 15 overall to reach number 1 on the countdown.
You know, this one really pained us to leave so many great action fighters off this list without even so much as an honorable mention. So how about this? Why don't you guys let us know in the comments below what your favorite action fighters are? Because I don't know about you, but I just want to log on to Fight Pass right now and start watching all these great guys and girls, because that's all I've wanted to do since I started this. Later, everybody.